Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. Military families are not like your traditional family. They are strong, brave, resilient, and some of the most incredible people I know. My name is Gracie, a U.S. Army brat, and I am your host. I am honored to be able to give military family members like myself a place for them to share their stories and experiences in the military life. Stay tuned for this week's guest. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child and Life. Today, I'm here with Michelle. So, Michelle, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. I'm excited to be part of this. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell me what it's like being a military spouse for you.
When I started dating my husband back in the 80s, I didn't really fully understand. And then when we got married, he was in the National Guard. And at first, it just, didn't hit me. And then later on, as you see the pride of America, when he puts that uniform on and the love that people have for him, it's just amazing when you see that. And it resonated with so many people of how proud we are of America and how proud we are of soldiers. And then, as his career in the National Guard, he was deployed for a year he volunteered to go with the unit. And then you see that whole support behind you. And it was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It really gives you a new perspective, like you were saying, on this country, this world that we live in, and, that pride that we have in that, sense that we have of freedom that, not other countries have. And growing up in the lifestyle, I understood it, from the second I was born, that was kind of instilled in me. But like looking at it in my adult, eyes, my adult lenses, it's like, wow, there are still so many people who are uneducated about, the military life, what we go through, how we experience more challenges than other people. And, that real sense of freedom, is missing.
I agree with you. Yes, I think that I don't know if we just because we were part of the Afghanistan Iraqi war and those small percent of the population supported that, but then
Right.
Now that that's subsided, I feel like we're kind of losing that a little bit, and it takes a tragedy like 9/11 when people just start backing everybody, and then we just kind of come numb to that, and that pride. I just wish it was around at all times.
Yeah. This is going to make me sound really young, but I was not alive when 9/11 happened, but I still, get the chills from, when it's talked about, because I just knowing that my dad served in Afghanistan, knowing that I know people who served in Afghanistan and Iraq and who are experiencing, my dad, the physical wounds from it, but then some others experiencing the loss of life and the loss of friends and family. And those who are experiencing, again, those physical wounds, but also those wounds of, PTS and TBI and those kind of unseen things as well. So I think, even though I wasn't necessarily alive for it and I wasn't around and I won't remember it, but I think, seeing it play out in history, like it's really impacted me. But you're so right. Like we have these huge historical events that are literally terrifying. And, that's what it takes to bring this country together. And that's what it takes to instill that sense of, no, we're still America. We're still, this patriotic country. And I will, always forever get emotional watching those days after 9/11 of, the national anthem being played and everyone sobbing. So, it's definitely something that I think is being lost in this country.
I agree. And when the national anthem plays, I get all tearful myself and just stand with just, hopeful that our country can just always stay together and love them. I love our country. I would hope that everybody else does. It's just forever ingrained in you. And even though it's just a National Guard for my husband, as yours was more full-time of your experience, it's still there. It's still ingrained. It's part of who you are, and it's part of, ingrained in you forever.
Right. Yeah. That's why I love, talking to so many different families and so many different, service members that served in different capacities because I think, we can't have one without the other. It starts somewhere. And so it's really cool to see the different experiences that everyone faces. And, I had a very different experience in my childhood and, um, just growing up kind of as an infant, my dad was in the reserves. And then as like a young child, he didn't serve. He took a break in service. And then, as my, tween years, I guess,
Mhm.
he
Yeah.
was serving. And then, the rest of it, it's like, you know, he retired. And so it's like on and off again, but it's so interesting to hear from kids and families who it was their entire life and even spouses who were military kids and then, became spouses. Like it's so crazy to hear how some people are just so ingrained in the military life that that's all they know.
Mm-hmm.
And then stepping in the civilian world, it's so different and
Mm-hmm.
difficult to, ingrain back into. But even just as a spouse, or just as a child, having a long stint of service of, even 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it may be, it's hard to take that transition back into the civilian world.
Correct. Yes. And that's the part that, when, as I see from the military, and you go on military bases, things are very structured. People are very
Right.
respectful. They're not going to tolerate that. And you can definitely see that in young adults. And then when you step in society, you don't see that as much. And it is a transition for those that are serving, and trying to integrate back in society, and the expectation that people will, just take care of their own business, however that looks. And then the support, being in the National Guard, my husband always wasn't in an area of a support unit. And when he deployed, he went with a different unit. He volunteered to go. And so in our community, we did not have a family support unit. So I was just the one wife that had children, that her husband was deployed in. And I think the community just wasn't sure how to handle that. And, so that my learning lesson is to people is like, you don't necessarily have to say things with words, as you just can be next to people and say, hey, I'm here for you, and a hug, or what can I do to help you? Instead, people say awkward things, and because it's an awkward situation, like, oh, did you see the news today? And I'm like, I got 3 teenagers by myself
Right.
scrambling, and I worked as a school social worker. And no, the news wasn't something I wanted to watch anyway, but it wasn't something that I had time for either. And, you instantly become a single parent, which I wasn't before. And then just that reality of, hey, just can somebody just tap me out, even just let me have supper, or let me go to bed early. There was just not that option. And I think that words matter greatly, and how you can really damage a person. Specifically, our 16-year-old son struggled with, people were saying this. I want to say they want to say it out of kindness. I don't think people mean to say bad things. And they said to him, he was the man of the house and he needed to take care of me. He had pure anxiety of that. And we got him into counseling for that. And came to find out that, I just had to tell him, I want you to be a son, not a spouse to me, and I'm going to mess up. Like, I wasn't used to being a single parent. When I mess up, we're going to have ice cream for dinner. We're just going to roll with it. We had a lot of ice cream that year, because it was tough. And,
Right.
but, I don't think that people intentionally meant that to be bad. I think they were just trying to support him, but that caused him great anxiety. And if I didn't get him counseling, he probably still has anxiety to this day at being 36, of just thinking like he didn't know what to do with that. And, I just want people to realize that words can damage people, and we just don't have to always say something. We can just be there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's like one big thing, especially with military kids when a parent deploys, it's like you have to step up and
Mm-hmm.
fill the shoes of your parent who's gone and but you still have to be a kid at the same point. Like you can't necessarily just throw everything to the wind,
Hmm.
once that parent's gone, but you take on more of a responsibility.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the hardest things to deal with as a kid because not only do you feel that you have to take on more responsibility, but then you have people around you saying, "Hey, like, well, what are you doing? Like, you're taking on more responsibility.
Hmm.
Like, you're doing all of this." And I lost a lot of friends growing up because I was more mature than they were, and that's just the way it was. And I will never trade my maturity for the world because it's made me who I am today.
Hmm.
Still, turning 22 in a few months and, in college and, I stand out in a crowd of college kids because they're all off partying, they're all off doing other things, and to each their own. But, I'm over here with a smaller group of people who are just, we're focused, we're driven, we're dedicated and determined to, complete XYZ and still having fun while we're doing it, but we kind of know when to flip that switch,
Right.
just
Exactly.
because of how we grew up and how um, what we've experienced. And that's not just military kids either in that group. Like, I don't want to just,
Hmm.
seclude that. But, people who have experienced so many things in their life and, we have more of an appreciation, I think. And so it's definitely something that it's a struggle in the military world and the military community to be able to go forward and still be young, but still be our age. Because it was so difficult as a 9-year old to be a 9-year old, but also to be a caregiver at the same point.
Correct. And I think you can tell children of parents that have been deployed or in the military, there is that sense of maturity, um, that sense of pride in America, and that sense of and you definitely can see that, and so it's appreciated. I see it. I can tell. Um, you know, as a school social worker, I've had kids that have moved in, and they're like, "Yes, ma'am," and they're
Right.
very polite and answering your questions, and so you can definitely tell, and it's appreciated. I think by other adults.
Yeah.
And I think the
Especially,
other thing that I think too that is always another thing that I like to express is the 988 part of life. Is we have so many soldiers that come back or have never been deployed, and just it's just too much and they can't handle it. And more soldiers are dying from suicide than they are dying from being overseas,
right.
or in the military. And so I think it's an area that I think we need to hyper focus on, because people shouldn't be ending their life at early ages, and then we could just get some support for them.
Right. Yeah, I think especially now when we don't necessarily have an active conflict going
Mhm.
on, we're seeing it a lot. And I mean, the statistic may have changed by now, but it was at 21 a day,
Mhm.
of service
Mhm.
members that we're losing. And so it's really hard, um, especially, we lived on Fort Sam where it was a major hospital, like Walter Reed at the time. And all of these injured service members were coming in, and granted, that is why we were there as well, um, from facing traumatic injuries. However, like we know people who killed themselves in the barracks, and that's hard.
Mhm.
The base would go on lockdown, and we're like, oh well, we wonder why, because your base doesn't necessarily always just go on lockdown, and then it's heartbreaking to find out, the next day, a couple hours later, when the news starts to break,
Mhm.
um, that somebody killed themselves and somebody that
Mhm.
um, killed themselves. And granted, I was 9, so it's hard to understand, and it was hard to do that. But, looking back, it's like, oh my goodness, like we send these guys back and not all of them have the support that my dad luckily had,
Mhm.
those days that my sister and I would be in the room over and getting up and getting ready for school, he's like, that's my reason why. That was my reason why. Like if I didn't have my
Right.
girls coming in saying, "Hey, let's go. We gotta go to school. Like, are you gonna come with us to the bus stop?" Like he's like, if I didn't
Right.
have that, then I wouldn't be where I am today. Um,
Hmm.
so most people don't have that when they come back. A lot of single soldiers still, a lot of the guys, this is back in 2011, 2012. But a lot of those guys who came back injured were, my goodness, I couldn't even begin to tell you the amount that were my age, 20,
Hmm.
21, 18, 19, fresh, fresh
Right. Right.
adults. And
Yes.
um, most of them had their parents come and take care of them and be their caregiver and be their support. But some people weren't lucky enough to have that. Some people didn't have that support system. And so that's military families as a whole, service members, spouse, children, like you really need to have that support system. Um, and from somebody who understands, because I've learned in my adulthood that it's so important to have other military kids as friends, other
Hmm.
um, military kids who have parents who were traumatically injured, like mine, who walked
Hmm.
through similar shoes that I did. And it's really important to just have those people who actually understand around you to be able to help support you.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. I think that, and you just get that bond. Like our son that went into the military, his friends that he still has, even after he's out of the military, his best friends came to the wedding and military, just all lined up. All
Yeah.
these people that he has met, and they'll forever be his friends.
Yeah.
And I think they support each other, and I think that's important.
Right. And
We
those
have
are the
this
people,
understanding.
yeah, those are the people who are there for the lifetime. No
Mhm.
matter how many times you move, no matter how many times, um, you know, I have people who live in, California, Washington, like complete opposite side of the world, of the country, who are still my best friends because
Mhm.
we've experienced things together. We have shared experiences. I have friends that I've never even met in person before, thanks to technology, thanks to the way that this world is. And so that's
Mhm.
been like the biggest appreciation from the military life is just it's not always about the people who are next, like neighbors with you, right? It's
Mhm.
those people who are always texting you, checking in on you, who are there for you when, a phone call comes through, who can drop what they're doing and fly across the country for you. It's those people who
Mhm.
um, you're not necessarily close by distance, but you're close by heart.
Correct. Yes, and I think that bond is just so strong, and you can see it in different people that in the military. And we go to a lot of vendor events and really spread the 988 information out, and they'll just come up to each other in the military, like my husband, and they'll have something they've shared. Whether it's a duty station they were assigned to at some point, and then they're just talking and they're glowing, and they find somebody else to support them and have that understanding. And we were just at one last weekend, and a mom and a daughter. The daughter was like your age, and the mom probably my age. And the mom was like, I never even heard these stories, and she's sharing them with my husband, the daughter that was deployed, and she said, I never heard these stories. And
Yeah.
so they start talking when they've got someone else to share it with, and I think we just need to have more opportunities for them to do that, and then just definitely spread the 988 information out, to just reach out.
Yeah. I think having some sort of common interest is so important, for the military. And when you talk to another military family member, child,
Mm-hmm.
spouse, service member, that common interest is the military.
Mm-hmm.
It is this country. It is that patriotism, that freedom. And you talk to people, and I've never met people before, and I can talk to them for hours because we have
Mm-hmm.
that common interest. We have um, that shared bond in some weird way or another. And it's so crazy to talk to people and be like, "Oh, you went to this school, like you were in this class, like I was in this school in this class in this year." Like um
Mm-hmm.
finding that paths cross at
Mm-hmm.
some weird time in some weird way. And it's really cool to see just how interconnected this whole community is and how it's literally just one big spider web, and you never know when paths are going to cross, when they're not, when you're going to meet people, when you're not going to meet them, and then um,
Mhm.
connecting even after so many years because, a decade could go by and you don't talk to someone, but then it's like right there, picking back where you left off.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then just having those stories and knowing someone else is there and know you have other support. And you may not see that person, like we don't see these people again, but then they just know that they were able to connect at that moment.
Right. And you can, I love technology. It's a love-hate relationship for me. Um, but, I love that sense of technology because you're always able to stay connected with people that have made an impact on your life. And, I might not talk to people very frequently, but I know that I have them on social media and, we're kind of watching each other's lives from the
Mhm.
outside. And,
Yes.
it's so easy to be able to check in on people and to kind of just send a message. It takes 2 seconds to say, hey, how are you?
Right.
Um, and then just having those genuine conversations with people about things that are going on. And I will never
Hmm.
forget the way that the military community kind of surrounded when the drawback from Afghanistan happened and
Hmm.
how much of a struggle it was for many of us. I was glued to the couch, watching the news, watching it unfold. Um, Sometimes in tears because I just, shock before my eyes, and then stepping into the civilian world and going to my place of employment and being like, I'm struggling. And they're like, oh, well, why? Like, we don't understand because they'd never
Hmm.
lived it. But then being able to talk with my military friends and them being like, oh no, we're struggling too. Like this
Hmm.
really sucks. This is hard.
Hmm.
My dad didn't give, two of his limbs for this to happen. So
Correct.
it's really hard to sometimes get that conveyed to the civilian world of what we go through and how it impacts us, but then you have to have that community of military people around you to kind of
Yeah.
surround you and go, hey, no, you're not alone. Like you're not crazy.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And what did we do this for a purpose, and what was our purpose? And thank your dad for your service and yours also.
Thank
And
you.
as a child through that, you serve also.
Yeah. I think that goes unnoticed sometimes. Like the family serves too behind the
Hmm.
spouse, the kids, like we all serve. We all have some sort of service to this country. And, we're the ones who serve on the home front. We're the ones who make sure that the house is still going, that the,
Hmm.
the
Yes.
dogs are fed, that everything is taken care of, and that um we're still able to go on and, we're supporting our service member. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Hmm. Correct. And in your family bonds over whatever happens during that time and has that
Right.
understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to wrap up, I wanted to ask you one more thing. And what advice would you give to another military spouse?
Oh, great question. That the best advice is flexibility and understanding that there's things are going to change quickly, and the fighting it isn't going to help, and just being super flexible and super understanding of your spouse, and just realize that other people are watching you, and so the most supportive you can be, and just be super flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the podcast and sharing what it's like being a military spouse in your eyes and all the support you give to this country.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Grace of a Military Child and Life podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a like, follow, and comment. Also, be sure to check out Instagram and Facebook at Grace of a Military Child and Life for more awesome content. For information on the podcast, Military Child Bigs and Littles, Go AMCL blog, or other resources, visit www.goamcl.org.
You can also email me at Gracie, that's GRACIE @GOAMCL.org with any questions or comments. To be a guest on the podcast, you can schedule it at www.goamcl.org/schedule a podcast, all one word, or contact me via social media or email. Stay tuned for the next episode where another incredible story is shared.